Murfreesboro and Rutherford County are so rich in their respective histories, with many women who've had integral roles in creating our community's sense of place. The Rutherford Arts Alliance is proud to partner with Murfreesboro City TV to showcase a number of these women as a part of our Leading Ladies of Rutherford County History project. From murals to our community-involved play, A Party of 12 by Mary Donay Johnson, we're proud to honor these diverse women of our past who inspire us as we give them a voice in today's world. Let's find out more about one of these leading ladies.
Sarah King's impact was felt both locally and nationwide. She played a key role in the preservation of both the Rutherford County Courthouse and Oakland's mansion. King was also the first Tennessean elected President General of the National Society of the Daughters of the American Revolution. Her time with the DAR gave her the opportunity to interact with President Ronald Reagan, politicians, and celebrities.
Well, with me are the two daughters of Sarah King, and we spent the morning at the Gore Center on the MTSU campus, which collects regional family histories. So we've had a great fun time talking about Sarah this morning, but today I want us to talk about what was it like? What was her life like in East Nashville growing up, all the way, and then all the highlights until she was President General of the Daughters of the American Revolution, a national title.
She actually was born in Murfreesboro, seventh generation of her family, and they moved to Nashville, East Nashville, when she was 4 years old. And I remember her telling me a story about back then they had no money. Even though her father had a really good job with the telephone company, that still, during the Depression, didn't go too far. So she would go through the lunch line, and she had a nickel, and she could choose. This is our mother's personality. She had to choose between something like a vegetable, which was healthy, or dessert, which she loved. And she would always choose the dessert. She had a best friend who had a quarter every day, and she was always jealous because the best friend didn't eat everything on her plate. And she wished that she had had at least one more choice to put on her plate. But they had a terrible tornado that came through when she was a little girl and destroyed her house. Basically, I think there were 3 walls standing. Her brother and her mother were terribly injured, and it was during the night, it's famous tornado that went through and destroyed a good bit of East Nashville. And that had a huge impact on her because she was afraid of bad weather from then on. And if she thought there was something bad coming, we would immediately be in the basement of our house.
They had to live in temporary housing for 3 months so their house could be repaired. It was an awful storm, and the same tornadoes go through East Nashville for some reason. I think that's the third. It was the first of 3 that have gone through East Nashville.
She ended up doing very well at East Nashville High School and made wonderful, lifelong friends, and then was fortunate to get to go to Vanderbilt. Made her own clothes when she went to Vanderbilt. And she actually made a lot of her fancy dresses that she wore in the Sam Davis pageant and some of the historical things that went on in Murfreesboro. You would see her in these not fancy gowns, but they were handmade. She made them herself.
And we have lots of pictures of her in those dresses.
Oh, fun.
So she married our father. They were both students at Vanderbilt.
She was pre-med. Pre-med. Unusual that she was pre-med. She said her teachers didn't like the fact that she was in pre-med because they thought it was a waste.
Should be some guy in that place, not a woman.
And she said, and look at it now, more than half of the class is women. So.
And your father's full name was?
Walter Hughey, Heghey, King. And they called him Hughey. It was his mother's maiden name. They married after her sophomore year at Vanderbilt. And back then, if you got married, you didn't stay in school. So they moved to Smyrna. And when they weren't living with his parents, they lived at the Sam Davis home in an extra cabin that they had there.
She cooked, catered meals for people there.
But just to give you an example of how fearless she was, when Daddy joined the Marines, he was stationed out at Camp Pendleton in California, and she drove out there by herself, either that or with my older brother, who was a baby at the time, 3 times. So Daddy would get the gas coupons from people whose family couldn't travel and collect them and then mail them to her, and she would get in a car all by herself. I mean, there were no hotels, basically. She had some wrecks. One time she ran off the road and it rolled over, and somebody stopped and rolled it back over, and she just headed back on.
Going back to the Sam Davis home now, what was the connection to the Sam Davis home that they were able to live on the farm there?
Well, they had the property, and then Mother helped out. She catered for events out there in a tea room. And
well, our grandparents' house was across the street from the Sam Davis home. And our grandmother started the Sam Davis Memorial Association, or helped start it. And so that, I guess, that they helped get the property bought by the state. And so there was just a big connection. When we grew up, we were always in the Sam Davis pageant. You know, my brother would be Sam Davis and I would be his little sister. And it was a big part of our lives.
Then from Sam Davis home, where did they live?
We lived in Smyrna, Dixon, Lebanon, and then in Murfreesboro. We moved to Murfreesboro in 1958. And we were sad to leave Lebanon. We loved it so much, but we got to Murfreesboro and our mother just took off like a rocket. She got real involved with preserving Oaklands and also the courthouse. And so I think it was in
it was too long after they came here that they asked her to speak to the city government, because they were literally going to tear the courthouse down, just like blast it.
Because it needed so much work.
So a group of women got
DAC,
together.
Daughters of American Colonists, I think that's right.
In the Tennessee Historic Preservation Group, and they asked her to speak, and she did, and she convinced them. And then when they were going to add on to it, she convinced them to do it in the style of the original building. They were adding some wings for more space. And then Oaklands, it was just falling apart.
We have a picture of Oakland's before the renovation, and it's pretty incredible. I remember peeling paint off the bricks when I was a little girl. But it was in dire straits, and she was the first regent of Oakland's, of the association that supports Oakland's, and the founding regent, I guess. And
so because she had 7 generations ahead of her in Rutherford County, she did know so much about county history. But the other thing is she respected it so much and she treasured it, and she wanted everybody else to treasure it too. And if you tear it down, you can't treasure it. So I think those women proved that it was well worth the effort to keep that courthouse.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. She told them that night that it was the most beautiful courthouse in the state of Tennessee, and I think it sort of shamed them into, well, oops, we better not tear that one down.
And especially with our history, too, of having served as a state capital for a few years there.
That's right.
It had meaning for the whole state beyond that. And Oakland's was quite, that's the Oakland's Historic House Museum on Manny Avenue. That was quite a challenge because it was very much in ill repair also.
Yeah.
So you get a group of women together and things happen.
So she also, I remember when we would go to a cemetery, it was like, do not step on those graves. And, so you honor the dead. So the old city cemetery, which we drove past coming into town today, and it looks amazing, people were driving their cars through it, over the graves. And she knew that how important the people were who were buried there. And there were some Revolutionary soldiers who had been buried there. And she went and she asked them to clean it up, and she got some groups to fund buying the fence to go around it and protect it as it should be. So that was...
She had a thing about cemeteries. She loved them. And we would go on vacations, and that's what we would do, was go to cemeteries.
And study the markers.
And study genealogy.
Look for family.
She was a
markers.
great genealogist. She could remember everybody's birth date, death date, all about them. She had an amazing memory.
And our father loved it too, so
Yeah.
it was a hobby for both of
Yeah.
them.
So in 1961, she joined the DAR, and in 3 years she was chapter regent. And then in, I think, 7 years, so 1968 she was state regent. So that was pretty incredible, meteoric rise in DAR. And then right after that, right after she was state regent for 3 years, she became a national officer. She was the curator general of the DAR. And did a wonderful job in that respect. She got the museum accredited. She did all sorts of repairs and improvements to the museum that needed to be done. And then she ran for president general in 1983. She won that election. It was a very contested election, and she was president general from 1983 to 86. She lived in Washington, D.C. at the Capitol Hilton, and it was the highlight of her life. I mean, she just loved it, every minute of it. And she did a really good job. Her big focus was on membership. And she, I think that the number of people in the DAR at that time were 212,000, which was the most that it's ever had in the history of the organization. And that was really, as state regent and as national president, that focus was membership. And the Murfreesboro chapter here, Colonel Hardy Murphy, it's one of the largest in the country. And that's a lot of her enthusiasm. She created enthusiasm for that chapter. And
the time you said her election was very controversial. Tell us more about that.
Well, it was a contested election. So there were two slates of officers, and it was very close election. And thankfully, our mother won the election, but it was a bitter loss for the people, the other slate. And they continued to give her a difficult time while she was president general. And they found an African American woman who had applied for membership to the DAR, and she had received a member-at-large membership, but she had never found a chapter that would take her as a member, one in the DC area. And so they brought this woman to light with the Washington Post and newspapers in Washington, and so it became a big issue. And our mom was on 60 Minutes, the Today Show, Newsweek. I mean, she was in the media so much, but all because of this issue. And it turns out that once they found out that she was struggling to find a chapter, they found a chapter. My mother became dear friends with Lena Ferguson, was her name, and it just ended up being a wonderful opportunity. Mm-hmm. And our mother took on that as an challenge, and so she worked very hard to make sure that that didn't happen again.
While she was President General, she got to be friends with Ronald Reagan, and he had her as an advisor. She got to go to White House briefings, and Nancy Reagan joined while Mother was. She's relentless.
And
she
Barbara
was,
Bush. Barbara Bush
she
too.
got everybody she could to join the DAR.
Mm-hmm.
And she went to the Army War College and had opportunities to do so many things. And during her campaign, which was, it was like running for President of the United States. Mm-hmm. You have to go to every state and speak to all the chapters. You have to get the vote out. And so she had a great group of people that were all volunteers.
She called it the Murfreesboro Mafia.
Uh-huh.
They were the DAR chapter in Murfreesboro was just awesome. And Miss Mary Hall was like the leader of the pack. And they would go to Washington and create these beautiful receptions, and they worked their hearts out to get her elected. And it worked. It worked.
I think in the end it was the Southern charm that did it. Mm-hmm. I do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And talk a little bit more about what a presence the Daughters of the American Revolution were and still are in the whole DC environment there. Their annual meeting and how they were always working very, very closely with the public servants that were in the national area.
So they're right in their buildings are located right in the heart of Washington, D.C. It is an absolutely beautiful building with a wonderful auditorium that's used throughout that area for big events, concerts and speeches and forums. And it's all owned by the DAR, right there in the heart of Washington, D.C.
Our mom always told us that it was the largest amount of property owned by women in the world.
Huh.
And it's on the corner of D Street, 1776 D Street. It's on the corner of Constitution Avenue and D Street. It is fabulous. It's so beautiful.
So when they meet, before COVID, they had these huge gatherings of women from all over, and there are DARs in France and Australia, New Zealand, Mexico, England, and they all gather, and they send representatives from every chapter in Washington, D.C., and they all wear long gowns, and they have about 3 or 4 evenings. One is focused on national defense, when they could have the Secretary of State come. One of the evenings when we were there, George Bush, who was Vice President, came and spoke. But it's the most patriotic. They march in with bands playing, and they play the marches that you hear 4th of July during the fireworks. It is a glorious experience. And I think for sure every DAR should go. I wish everybody could see it, because it just brings love of country right into your heart. Each state has luncheons and teas, and there's a Tennessee box in the auditorium, and she would always invite Tennessee congressmen, senators, anybody that she could get. General Moore, who had been the commander at Seward and then went on to be the Strategic Air Command general, 4-star general, and she loved having him. But there were always, and Miss MacArthur.
She came to a lot of the things in D.C., right?
She was also very supportive of Mother, and she went to the Treaty of Paris.
Yeah, she went to the Treaty of Paris with them, and she was a big part of it because she was MacArthur's wife, and so she went with them to every single thing. And that was a highlight for our mom, was the trip to Paris. When she was first elected, she announced that they were going to celebrate this milestone of the Treaty of Paris and Versailles, and so it was a group of hundreds of them that went over, and they took the city by storm, and the people loved our mom. She would wear this red suit with the black hat with the plumes coming up, and they called it her uniform. And
always the banner.
The banner,
also.
yeah.
And the medallions,
Yeah.
medals.
So they interviewed her, their newspapers, their television, because it was such a huge celebration. They had a midnight dinner at Versailles, which is pretty special. And she loved every minute of it. Pressed down that Champs-Élysées with her feather hat going, and just...
Well, speaking of her hats, let's go back to how she developed her hat collection.
Her best friend in East Nashville was Orcelia Austin, and Orcelia was a milliner. She made all of our mother's hats, and they were exquisite. And so that became her trademark, and we have an article that talks about, it has pictures of her and many of her hats, some with peacock feathers.
That's my favorite one.
Our dad raised peacocks, so Orcelia made a hat for her out of peacock feathers, and it was just wonderful.
The other thing that's really interesting about Sarah is her running for public office when we didn't have many women in public service. So tell us, when did that come in relationship to her DAR service in D.C.?
Well, in 1976, this is before her DAR times. Okay. So in 1976, she decided to run for Congress. Joel Evans was retiring, and so she decided to run, and she was one of 9 candidates and the only woman. And she took it on with a vengeance. She went across the state speaking and milking cows. We have a picture of that. And
now wait, how does that go along with running for Senate?
Well, they'd go to state fairs, and all the candidates would be there. If you weren't there, then you were missing out. So all the candidates would be there, and whoever would get the most milk out of the cow would
have
be
accolades.
The star.
Yeah,
a straw ballot.
And so we have the cutest picture of our mother sitting on a pail and milking a cow, which I promise you was the first and the last time that she ever did that.
How'd she even know how to do it?
Daddy gave her a
We
lesson.
had cows. We grew up with cows. Daddy would milk the cows, and we drink the milk and eat the meat. And
So she got a tutorial beforehand.
Right.
I bet she had a hat on too.
She did.
So this is running for not for the House of Representatives, not
United States
but
Congress.
Al Gore was one of the, well, he won.
Yeah.
But they stayed close friends from then on, and he came to events for her. He was very loyal to her.
He was very loyal. He always told her that he named his daughter Sarah for Sarah King.
Well, there you go.
So that's what he told her.
We have trunks of things that belong to mostly Collier, Carmine Collier, And we found this. It says President of the Rutherford County Fair Association. We're just assuming it has some Collier significance. Don't really know.
It's pretty amazing.
And this was one of the campaign materials. This was her motif for her campaign.
There's crowns pinned on all that.
And this was worn cross shoulder, right?
Yes, this one was. This isn't a traditional DAR thing, but
It's a vote.
normally they wear their
Get out the
ribbons.
vote. She said it was harder to run for President General of the DAR than it was for Congress.
Wow. Well, that's a national thing. So tell me about how it makes you feel now to be able to share her story with our audiences in this Leading Lady project.
Well, we are so proud of her. She was a force to be reckoned with. She was strong. She was bold, like Herming said, and a leader, a great leader. And I'm so proud of what she did, all the many things she did, and the friends that she made across the world.
And I think you have several of her letters back and forth with these people that we would recognize their names.
Right.
And she developed that.
She had a relationship with Barbara Bush. They wrote letters back and forth, and we have those in our files. And Ms. MacArthur.
She respected people, and she got that back. She loved people, but she also respected them and honored them for their accomplishments. And I think it's an amazing honor that you all are
Yes.
making for her.
I think she was a woman before her time.
Definitely. Definitely.
If she were living in the times that we are now, there's just no telling what she could have done.
For more information about our project, Leading Ladies of Rutherford County History, visit our website, leadingladiesrutherford.com. Or if you have a story of someone from the past who inspired you, you can share it on our website. For more information about the Rutherford Arts Alliance and what we're doing to promote arts, culture, and heritage, visit rutherfordartsalliance.org. And thank you for watching.